All right, seventh graders. This video is to review lesson 28, which is on translating ordinary statements into categorical language or into standard categorical form. Now remember, the first thing you're going to need to keep in mind for this lesson is, what do we mean by standard categorical form? You should be immediately familiar with A, E, I, or O statements. That's what we mean by standard categorical form, where it's either all or no, or some are and some are not, right? And we're always having a subject and a predicate, and somehow the subject is going to be equal to the predicate. So some of this subject is equal to some of that subject, or all of this subject is equal to this subject. That's what we're always talking about when we're talking about standard categorical form. And so when we approach the topic of how do we translate some normal statements, we might call, or some common everyday statements into standard categorical form, we're primarily asking, how do we take sentences that don't talk about some, all, none, things like this, and make them actually fit like that. Now, we did this way back several units ago when we talked about making sure that there was always that to be language, right? We wanted all statements to have that to be term in the middle, or that to be verb in the middle, linking the subject and the predicate. But what we didn't do at the time, and what we need to do now, is make sure that whenever there is that to be language, we always have the all, some, A, E, I, or O terminology that's going to indicate what types of categorical statements these are. The book has three different instances that it wants us to look at. The first one is singular statements. The second one is indefinite statements. And the third one is if-then statements, what's sometimes called hypothetical statements. And that will be important for a few lessons from now towards the end of this unit, where we'll get into hypothetical syllogisms, and that's very important for much later in your logic careers. But for now, we're just dealing with the statements. So the first of these, once again, singular statements. This is when I use the term, a term that refers to the whole category as the term, okay? So I'm thinking of a one thing category. The best instance of this is really just a name. So the name we might want to use is Socrates. Everyone knows who I'm talking about when I'm talking about Socrates. I'm not just talking about any person who bears the name of Socrates, right? That category or that genus would be people named Socrates, but I'm talking about Socrates himself. That is a category of things which contains one and only one individual. And so because it contains one and only one individual, and I'm talking about that one individual, we would say all Socrates, okay? And so when you see things like John or John Smith or something like that, keep in mind, we're not talking about people with that name. We're talking about a singular individual. And so we always want to use all language. We want to translate these into a statements. And so if I have the sentence that says John is a mailman, I might want to translate that, or I would want to translate that into all John is a mailman. Now notice I'm not saying all Johns are mailmen, because I'm only talking about one thing. All John, the person named John in this situation, the one that I'm talking about, or we might want to be more specific, such as all John Smith, or all John Smith in this particular region of West Virginia, or something like that. That one person, the only John is a mailman. Okay, and so we always want to keep those in A statements. Some statements are a little bit more ambiguous, and we might call these indefinite statements. The book gives us two good examples. One is, the dogs ate my homework. And the second one is, cats are mammals. Or to keep things the same, we might say dogs are mammals. Now, notice in the first instance, I say, the dogs ate my homework, or dogs ate my homework. I'm not talking about all dogs. I'm talking about some dogs. Which dogs? Well, probably the 2 or 3 that seem to be involved in eating my homework. And so I would translate that statement as, some dogs ate my homework. Meanwhile, when I talk about dogs or mammals, I am actually talking about every single dog in that situation, and not simply the ones that it applies to. All dogs are mammals. So it's going to be dependent on the context. If you come across a sentence which just has a plural general category, you can know that you don't necessarily have enough context, or you might not have enough context to determine if it's all or some. But it will be one of those two options if you're talking about general category. And then the last one that it gives you is hypothetical syllogisms, right? If it is cloudy outside, then I will bring an umbrella. Right? If it is cloudy outside, then I will bring an umbrella. Or, as the book gives us an example, what is it? If you like chocolate, then you will love this cake. That's a hypothetical statement. And it can be kind of confusing because we actually have what seems to be two different sentences that are combined and pushed up against one another. If this thing takes place, then this other thing will take place. Well, we could translate it by keeping in mind that we are talking about in every situation that's described at the beginning, this result will come about. So if I say, if you like chocolate, then you will love this cake. That's the example that the book gives. I might say, okay, well, so in other words, every chocolate liker or every person that likes chocolate will be someone that likes this cake, right? In other words, all chocolate lovers are likers of this cake or lovers of this cake. You can use those terminologies somewhat more fluidly in these types of instances because you're not using that verb to like in the infinitive form or to love. You're not using that as the connection between the subject and the predicate. The whole idea of being a chocolate lover and being a cake lover are taken as the subject and the predicate. What's important to note here is that an if-then statement will always be universal. Now, the book does give us a negative version of this, but it's still universal too. So it says, if it's a hard test, then I won't pass. Or we could write this as, no hard test is a test that I will pass. No hard test is a test that I will pass. How do we know that that's negative? Well, because we could think of it this way, that every hard test is not a test that I will pass. I just put it in a way of framing it in a categorical statement. But we know that if it's an A statement, which is that every S is not P, well, that's just a way of rewriting an E statement, and it's a way that's more confusing, so you want to avoid that. Okay, so those are the three different types of statements which you're going to need to be really good at translating. Keep those in mind and be ready to see them on the upcoming test.